The quiet man with the strange belief lights in the studio were bright. The audience was clapping, laughing, whispering. Cameras moved slowly round the stage. Everything felt polished, shiny, like a perfect show. But something real was about to happen, something no one planned. Keanu Reeves sat quietly in his chair. He wore a simple black suit. His hands were resting on his knees. He looked calm, but his eyes held a kind of sadness, not the kind that begged for pity, no. It was the quiet sadness of a man who had seen too much, lost too much, and still chose to stay kind. Oprah Winfrey turned toward him with her usual charm. She was confident, warm, but sharp. People loved her because she knew how to pull out stories, how to make a guest cry, how to make the world listen. But today, something was different. Today, her words would push too far. She smiled and said, "So Keanu, we've heard rumors about your belief in something strange." The audience chuckled lightly. Keanu gave a soft smile. "What rumor?" Oprah tilted her head. "They say you talk to spirits, that you believe your loved ones are still with you. Like, literally with you." Laughter rolled across the studio. Not loud, not cruel, but the kind that cuts when you're on the receiving end. Keanu's smile didn't fade. He nodded gently. "Yes," he said, simply. "I believe they're still here. Not as ghosts, not in some horror way, just here, in energy, in kindness, in silence." Oprah raised an eyebrow. "Really? So, you believe your loved ones follow you around?" There was something in her voice, light sarcasm. Maybe not on purpose, but it was there, a slight mock, wrapped in a smile. Keanu paused. He looked down for a moment, then he looked up, directly at her. His voice was low, slow, soft. "Oprah, have you ever missed someone so much that even silence feels like their voice?" The laughter stopped. People grew quiet, very quiet. "Have you ever sat alone in a room," he continued, "and felt warmth, but there's no sun, no heater, nothing, just warmth, like a memory that wraps around you?" His voice shook slightly. "I lost my best friend. I lost my daughter. I lost the woman I wanted to marry. I don't see them, not like a picture, but sometimes I feel them, and that feeling saves me from falling apart." He wasn't angry. He wasn't embarrassed. He was just honest, raw, open. And it was stunning. Oprah's single quotes as smile faded, not out of shame but surprise, maybe even respect. "Keanu, I didn't mean to make fun," she said, her tone softer. "I was just curious. I think sometimes the way you speak about pain, it's different from how most people speak." Keanu nodded. "Maybe that's because pain isn't something you beat. It's something you carry with grace." The camera zoomed in slightly. His eyes had a quiet fire in them now, a strength that didn't need to be loud. He leaned back. "We live in a world that laughs at silence, that mocks belief. But sometimes, belief is the only thing that keeps people alive." One woman in the audience wiped her eyes, and just like that, the entire mood shifted. It was no longer a show. It became something deeper. Oprah took a breath. She was silent for a few seconds. Then she looked at the camera and said something no one expected. "I think we all need to hear that, maybe more than once." But behind that moment of grace was a deeper story, a story about where this belief came from, and what it cost Keanu to hold onto it all these years. Because what the world didn't know was that something had happened long ago, something painful, private, and almost supernatural that shaped the quiet man the world thought they knew. And soon, that truth would come out. The memory he never shared. The show ended, but the silence stayed. After the lights went off and the applause faded, Keanu walked out the back door of the studio alone. No big entourage, no bodyguard, just him, his thoughts, and the cool night air. His car was parked at the edge of the lot. As he unlocked the door, a soft voice called from behind, "Mr. Reeves." He turned slowly. It was a young intern from the studio, probably 23, nervous, holding a folder against her chest. "I just wanted to say thank you," she said, stepping closer. "What you said tonight, it helped me." Keanu gave a small nod. "Thank you for saying that." She hesitated, then whispered, "My mom passed last year. I still feel her sometimes. I thought I was crazy." Keanu's eyes softened. "You're not crazy," he said. "You're just still loving her." She smiled, tears forming. He reached out and gently touched her shoulder. Just a second. Just enough to say, "You're not alone." After she left, he sat in his car, but didn't start it. He stared at the wheel. His hands tightened, then relaxed. The night outside was still, but inside him, memories moved like storms. He hadn't told the full story. Not to Oprah. Not to anyone on camera. Because the truth behind his belief in spirits behind the warmth and silence was something he had buried deep, too deep. It started years ago, in a hospital room. The day Jennifer died. She was the woman he had loved. Not for a few months, not for attention, but quietly, deeply. Like a promise he never spoke out loud. They had planned a future. They had even picked baby names. And for a short moment, life had smiled at him. But then the accident happened, and Jennifer was gone. Except she wasn't. Not completely. After the funeral, Keanu went back to the small house they had shared. Everything smelled like her books, her soap, even the tea she loved. He sat in her chair that night, unable to move, barely able to breathe. Then, something strange happened. The radio, which had been silent all week, turned on by itself. A soft song played, her favorite. A song she had once danced to in the kitchen. Barefoot, laughing, twirling like a little girl. He thought it was a glitch. He turned it off. Next night, same thing, same song. He unplugged the radio. Third night, the song played again. This time, no power, no plug, nothing. He sat there frozen, staring at the radio. Then he whispered, "Jen," no answer. But suddenly, he felt a breeze, not from a window, not from outside. It moved across his face gently, like fingers brushing his cheek. And in that moment, he didn't cry. He smiled. He didn't tell anyone. Who would believe him? The world already thought actors were strange. Talking about spirits would only make headlines. Jokes, mockery. So he stayed quiet. But from that night on, he began to feel her. Not always, not every day. But sometimes in the loneliest moments, she came back. And not just her. His best friend River Phoenix, who died too young, once appeared in a dream so vivid. Keanu woke up laughing and crying at the same time. His daughter, who never took a breath in this world, sometimes came to him in music, in dreams, in a butterfly landing on his hand. He didn't see ghosts. He didn't hear voices. He just felt love. Love that refused to disappear. So yes, he believed. Not in magic, not in superstition, but in connection. In energy that stayed behind when bodies left. But this belief came with a cost. People judged. People laughed. And as he sat in his car now, remembering Oprah's question, he realized something. The world didn't need to understand him, but maybe, just maybe, someone out there was waiting to hear this truth. Maybe someone was standing on the edge of pain, thinking they were alone, and maybe his voice, his quiet voice, could pull them back. His phone buzzed. A message from his manager. "You're trending. Everyone's talking about your interview." Keanu sighed. "Here we go," he whispered. But what he didn't know yet was that one person watching the interview would change everything. Someone who had once mocked him. Someone who had power. And someone who was about to face a pain so deep. They'd come back to Keanu not for a headline, but for help. The woman behind the curtain. Next morning, Oprah sat in her quiet study with a cup of warm lemon tea. The sunlight streamed through the large windows, touching the gold frames on the wall. Photos of her with presidents, musicians, authors. But today, she wasn't looking at any of them. She was staring at her phone. There were over 500 messages. Not about her book club, not about the next show, all about Keanu. People had watched the interview from last night. They were sharing clips, writing comments, even making videos about his words. But what surprised Oprah wasn't the attention she was used to that. It was the silence in her own heart after the show. She kept hearing his voice. Have you ever missed someone so much that even silence feels like their voice? She hadn't told anyone this, not her producers, not her friends, but just a few months ago. Oprah had lost someone to her cousin. They had grown up like sisters. Oprah would stay at her house during long summers. They'd sleep on the floor, talk about dreams, and cry about boys. Even after becoming famous, Oprah never lost that bond. But cancer took her fast, and quietly. Oprah hadn't spoken much about it. She thought staying busy would help. She thought being strong meant not crying in front of anyone. But now Keanu's words were ringing in her soul, because she had felt things. Strange things. Her cousin's perfume smell in her kitchen, even though no one had worn it in months. The dream that repeated itself, her cousin waving, standing in the same dress she wore on their last trip together. But Oprah had pushed it all away. She told herself it was just grief, just her brain playing tricks, and maybe it was. But what if it wasn't? She opened her notebook, the one where she wrote personal thoughts. On the top of the page she wrote, "Why did I mock his belief?" She sat there, staring at the words. Then she underlined them twice. Maybe because I was afraid of my own, she thought. An hour later, she picked up the phone and called her producer. "I want to bring Keanu back," she said. The producer paused. "Okay? For what?" "Not for a show," Oprah said softly. "For a real conversation. Private." Meanwhile, across the city, Keanu was walking through a park. No disguise, just him, wearing a hoodie and jeans. A little boy ran past him chasing a red kite. Keanu stopped for a second and watched the boy's laughter rise into the sky. That used to be him once, running through fields in Toronto, dreaming of stories, never thinking he'd be famous or heartbroken or a symbol of silence. His phone buzzed again. A message. "Oprah wants to talk. Not for TV, just you and her. Private." She said, "It's important." Keanu read the message slowly. He could have said no. He didn't need drama, didn't want attention. But something told him this wasn't about her ego. It was about her pain. He replied with just one word, "Okay." The next evening, Oprah invited him to her house. No cameras, no reporters, just 2 chairs in a quiet garden, a small table with tea and biscuits between them. When Keanu arrived, he smiled gently and said, "Nice garden." Oprah looked at him and whispered, "I owe you an apology." Keanu shook his head. "You don't." "I do," she said. "I mocked something I didn't understand. But the truth is, I think I've felt it too. The warmth, the perfume, the silence that feels like love." He didn't say anything at first. He just waited. Then he asked softly, "Who did you lose?" And that's when Oprah, powerful, unshakable Oprah, began to cry. "My cousin," she said, her voice shaking. She was the only one who knew the real me before all this. Before fame, money, cameras. "I miss her every day. But I never believed she could still be here. Until you said what you said." Keanu leaned forward. "You don't have to believe anything. You just have to feel." They talked for hours. About loss, about pain, about why silence sometimes speaks louder than any word. But then, Oprah asked him something no one had dared to ask before. "Keanu, what was the one moment that made you believe?" Keanu looked away for a long time, and then he began to tell a story, one that even his closest friends didn't know. About a train ride. A stranger. And a note that changed his entire life. The note on the train was almost empty that evening. Years ago, long before he became a household name, Keanu Reeves had taken a quiet trip north. No cameras, no scripts, just him and the cold winter pressing against the glass window. He had just lost Jennifer. The funeral had passed. The world had moved on. But he hadn't. He remembered sitting near the back of the train, staring outside, barely blinking. Snow fell slowly, covering trees, hills, and everything in between. It felt like the world had turned quiet just for him, like time had agreed to pause and let him feel broken without rush. He didn't eat, didn't speak. Then, an old woman boarded the train at a small village stop. She wore a thick coat, a wear-upon hat, and her hands shook as she clutched a red bag. She looked around the car, then slowly made her way to Keanu's seat. "May I sit?" she asked, her voice soft, like falling leaves. He nodded without looking up. She sat beside him and said nothing. For the next 20 minutes, they both stared ahead. Silence between them, but not uncomfortable. It felt familiar. Then, out of nowhere, she asked, "Did you lose her recently?" Keanu turned his head slowly. "Excuse me?" "The woman you loved," she said gently. "She's not here anymore, is she?" Keanu's chest tightened. "How did you know?" "The old woman. Smiled. I see it in your eyes. The way they search the world for something they can't touch. Keanu looked down. Tears quietly filled his eyes. He didn't want to cry in front of a stranger, but he couldn't stop it. Something in her voice felt like a door opening, a door he had locked and buried. She died. He whispered. The old woman nodded slowly. And yet, she's still here. Keanu's head snapped up. What do you mean? The woman reached into her bag. She pulled out a small piece of folded paper and handed it to him. Read this when you're alone. She said, it was given to me by someone who helped me when I lost my husband. Keanu took the note without a word. When he looked back up, she was already standing. My stop, she said with a smile, and then she was gone. He didn't see her again. That night, in his hotel room, he finally opened the note. It read, just because the body is gone doesn't mean the love is. Love doesn't live in the bones. Love lives in the moments, in the wind, in the memory that makes you smile without warning. They are not behind you. They walk beside you now. He read it again and again, and for the first time in weeks, he slept deeply. In Oprah's garden, Keanu's voice trembled slightly as he finished the story. I never told anyone that, he said. Not even my closest friends. Oprah's eyes were full. Do you still have the note? She asked. Keanu nodded. I carry it in my wallet. Always. She leaned forward. Keanu, can you imagine how many people feel what you feel, but are too scared to believe it's real? He gave a soft smile. Maybe that's why I finally said it on your show. And then Oprah did something unexpected. She reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out her own notebook. Can I write that down? She asked. Keanu looked surprised. What? They are not behind you. They walk beside you now, she whispered. I want to keep that. He nodded. Of course. They sat in silence again, but it was a peaceful silence, full of understanding, like two people who had walked different roads, but ended up at the same quiet place. Then Oprah looked at him carefully. Keanu, would you be willing to talk about this on a bigger stage, not a show, not for views, but something that might help people heal? He tilted his head. What do you mean? I've been planning a private event. Something small. Something for people dealing with loss. I think they need to hear you. Not actor Keanu. Just you. He looked away for a moment, breathed in, then looked back. I'll do it, he said quietly. But only if we don't call it a speech. Oprah smiled. What will we call it? He leaned back and looked up at the stars. A conversation with the ones we've lost. She nodded slowly. I like that. But neither of them knew what was coming, because someone in the audience that night would challenge everything. And Keanu would have to defend not just his belief but the pain that shaped it. The man in the back row room was small, but full. Soft lights hung from the ceiling, and candles flickered gently at the corners. It didn't feel like a stage. It felt like a place where stories rested, where no one had to pretend to be okay. Oprah had kept her promise. This was not a show. No cameras, no flashing lights. Just a few dozen people sitting in a circle, most of them holding a photo, a letter, or a small item from someone they had lost. Keanu stood in the center, not behind a podium, not above anyone, just in the middle, wearing a simple sweater, holding nothing. He didn't start with hello. He started with silence. For almost a full minute, no one spoke. And in that silence, something happened. The room shifted. People sat a little straighter, hearts softened. It was as if Keanu was saying, this is what remembering feels like. Then, he spoke. I used to think silence was empty, he said quietly. But after I lost her, I learned silence can be full. He shared small things. How he walked into the kitchen sometimes and forgot she wasn't there. How he once set the table for two without realizing it. How grief didn't scream, it whispered. And how love, the kind that was real, never really left. It just changed form. People listened with wet eyes and soft hearts. A woman in the front held a teddy bear close to her chest. A man 2 seats away squeezed a wedding ring in his palm. But then, from the back of the room, a man stood. His voice was sharp, shaking with emotion. So what are you saying? That we should all pretend our loved ones are still floating around us? That death isn't real? Keanu turned slowly. His face stayed calm. I'm saying love doesn't die just because a heartbeat stops, he answered gently. The man shook his head. I lost my son. He was 5. I saw him take his last breath, and I haven't felt anything since. No energy, no warmth, just cold, just emptiness. His voice cracked. So don't tell me he's still with me when I can't even feel my own heart anymore. The room grew painfully quiet. Everyone turned to Keanu. But he didn't speak right away. Instead, he walked across the room and stopped just a few steps away from the man. Then he said something that no one expected. I'm sorry. The man blinked. What? I'm sorry, Keanu repeated. For what you saw, for what you carry, for the cold that's wrapped around you. I'm not here to give you magic or answers. I can't tell you how to feel. I wouldn't dare. He took a breath. But I can tell you this. When I lost my daughter, I didn't feel anything either. Not for months. Not even when people tried to hug me or say kind words. The world became silent, but not the healing kind. The kind that screamed. The man's lips began to tremble. Keanu stepped even closer. And then one day, I was walking through a bookstore, and I saw a child's book that Jennifer had once wanted to read to our daughter. I picked it up, and I swear I felt a small warmth on my back. His voice cracked slightly, and maybe it was just memory. Maybe it was just my mind. But in that moment, I felt less alone. The man's shoulders shook. What was the book? He whispered. Keanu smiled, tears forming in his eyes. The Velveteen Rabbit. The man covered his face with his hands and began to cry. A woman next to him reached out, held his arm. Someone else passed him tissues. And slowly, the cold he had spoken of began to melt. Keanu didn't return to the center. He stayed near the man, sat beside him, not as a speaker, but as someone who knew the language of loss. Oprah watched quietly from the side. Her eyes filled with tears. This was what she had hoped for. Not answers, not speeches, just connection. The night continued with quiet. Moments of sharing. Some people told stories, some just cried. But one thing became clear. The room had turned into something sacred. And when the evening ended, no one rushed to leave. They sat together, as if leaving too quickly would break the spell. But as Keanu stood to leave, Oprah walked over and whispered something in his ear. There's someone else who wants to speak with you, she said. Someone who's been watching quietly. Keanu looked puzzled. Who? Oprah nodded toward the side door. Her name is Sarah. She's not famous. She's not here for the event, but she saw your interview, and she thinks you might be the only person who can help her. Keanu turned toward the door. And what he saw would change everything, because Sarah wasn't a stranger. She was part of his past, a part he had buried, and she had a truth he wasn't ready to face. The faith that never left. Keanu stepped through the quiet side door, heart beating a little faster. It was a small hallway, barely lit. At the far end stood a woman in a gray coat, holding something in her hands, a book. Her posture was nervous, her eyes red as if she'd been crying for hours. She looked up. And froze. So did Keanu. For a few seconds, they just stared at each other. Then she whispered, "You remember me?" He blinked slowly. "Sarah." She gave a faint nod. "It's been 20 years, she said. Maybe more." Keanu took a step forward, gently. "I remember, from the retreat center. You were the volunteer who used to sing to the patients." Her eyes filled again. "And you were the one who always sat with the boy who had no visitors." Keanu smiled softly. "David, I still remember." His laugh. Sarah looked down at the book in her hands. "This belonged to Jennifer," she said quietly. "You left it at the hospice the day after she passed. I was the last nurse to see her." Keanu's breath caught. He hadn't even known someone had kept anything. Sarah opened the book slowly. Inside was a single handwritten note, Jennifer's handwriting. It read, "If Keanu ever feels lost, tell him this. He was my light, even in my darkest night. And love never dies, not real love." Tears spilled from Keanu's eyes before he could speak. Sarah stepped closer. "I never had the courage to send it to you. But after watching you on Oprah, hearing you speak, I knew I had to." He reached out with trembling hands and took the book, held it like something sacred. "Thank you," he whispered. Sarah nodded, then looked away. There's more. Keanu raised his eyes. More. She looked back at him, tears in her eyes. Keanu, I lost someone too, my daughter. 2 years ago. I didn't believe in anything after that. Not God, not love, not the soul. But when I watched you talk about feeling them, about energy, about silence, something broke open inside me. She took a deep breath for the first time. I didn't feel crazy for hearing her laugh in my sleep, for smelling her favorite shampoo in the hallway when no one was home. Keanu stepped forward. You're not crazy, and you're not alone. Sarah wiped her eyes. I guess I just needed someone to give me permission to believe again. And in that hallway, something happened. Keanu didn't say anything grand. He didn't quote anything wise. He just opened his arms, and Sarah stepped into them. They hugged tightly, not as strangers, not as friends, but as to broken people who had found something whole between them. 1 week later, Oprah aired a short, private message, not a show, just her sitting alone. She spoke to the camera, her voice calm, her eyes honest. We live in a world that rushes us to move on, to stay strong, to forget pain. But sometimes, the most powerful thing we can do is feel. She looked down, then back at the camera. Keanu Reeves reminded us that grief isn't weakness, and faith isn't foolishness. Sometimes, it's the only thing that holds us together. Months passed. Keanu quietly began funding grief centers across the country, small places where people could sit in silence, talk if they wanted, cry if they needed. No rules, no judgment. He called them the quiet rooms. On each door was a simple phrase, printed in small, soft letters. They are not behind you. They walk beside you now. The phrase became a movement. People started sharing their own stories, strangers who felt loved ones in dreams, in music, in sunbeams on their skin. What had once been mocked became a message of hope. But Keanu didn't return to interviews. He didn't want attention. He just lived quietly, kindly. And on certain nights when he walked alone under the stars, he'd look up and whisper, I still feel you. Not loud, not desperate. Just real. Because some faith doesn't need to be shouted. Some faith is quiet, steady, and full of love. And that kind of faith never leaves.